Once again, welcome. I'm Anais Salas. This is Dr. Eloise Prescott. I call her doctor because with her training in Chinese medicine, she would have earned that title if she lived in China. She would be Dr. Prescott. So I'm thrilled to be doing this with her. And as you know, our theme is to talk about losing the sweetness of life and some of the different perspectives on how someone can navigate through the experience of being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. For me, that's where I'm going to limit my scope. And Dr. Prescott is going to begin. She's going to introduce herself, and she's going to lead us in a centering meditation. Thank you for being here, Dr. Prescott.
Thank you so much, Anais. And I really appreciate you inviting me to do this with you. All right. Okay, so let's get started so we can get centered and focus our attention. All right, so the first thing I'd like you to do is to just relax. Make sure that the four corners of your feet are solidly on the ground. This enables you to receive the energy, the vibrance from the earth. Relax your ankles, relax your knees, your calves, your thighs, your buttocks. Make sure that your buttocks is centered and seated on your chair. Relax your shoulders. Relax your neck. And imagine that you have a puppet string in the center of your head, keeping your head erect. Place your arms on your lap and have your palms facing upward. And we're going to relax our eyelids, our cheekbones, our jaw and our mouth and chin. And we're going to begin by inhaling through our nostrils. Then we're going to allow the breath to go down into your dantian, which is located around 2 inches below your belly button. And from there, we're going to allow the breath to go from the top of your head to the tip of your toes, and then out through the skin. On the exhalation, we're going to allow the breath to go to our families, our loved ones, our communities, our city, our state, our country, the world, and the universe. So I'd like for us to begin. Take a deep breath in. I hope everyone is feeling a little bit more settled. Everyone introduce themselves, or do we want to do that?
Oh, yeah, we can do that. But first, Dr. Prescott, tell us some information about you. I'd love to have you share a little bit, just as we get going, because you're new to some people.
Okay. All right. Okay, so my name is Eloise Prescott, and everyone calls me Elle or Eloise. And I'm a licensed acupuncturist. I studied at the Wan Institute for Graduate Studies. That was not, let's see, it was definitely a career change. I worked in college administration for a number of years, and I was laid off. And really, I had been asking the universe to do that for a long time anyway. And I started the Wan Institute in 2006. So I've been practicing for about 11 years now. And it's fascinating. My first I guess my first introduction to spirituality came in 2000. And I took a series of workshops on really what was, I learned later was the secret. And it was very informative, and it started me thinking in a different direction. And after that, I started studying quantum physics, read a number of books by Gary Zukav, some interesting material by Carolyn May, and it just felt like I was moving in a different direction. Then when I got laid off, my husband at the time said, well, you always want to do something different with your life anyway. And so I started doing research. I started studying Reiki first because I was told there were no acupuncture schools in this vicinity. And I went through Reiki. I did Reiki 1, 2, and 3 because I just loved it. I loved the energy work. And then I went to, then I found out that they had just opened up an acupuncture school in Pennsylvania, the first one, and I could make it to that. So this journey has been very, very, very just magnificent. You know, even for what we're going through now, it's given me such a handle on, you know, really what's going on in the universe. As I tell people, as I truly, truly believe, what you don't see is much more powerful than what you do see. And we are all spiritual beings having this physical experience. So those things, love and gratification, are things that we don't really see. Compassion. To me, those are the things that are most important for us to hold on to at this time. So with that, as we say, it's an African tradition, we can pass the stick around to the next person.
I think it would be lovely for those of you who've taken the time to join us here. We can I'll unmute everybody and just share your name and where you're joining us from. And I would like to know whether you have anyone in your family or circle of friends who is dealing with the issue of diabetes, whether type. Well, let's just take a minute to get to know each other. Thank you, Eloise, for the meditation and for your sharing of how your journey got you here, which is fantastic. Okay. All right. I'm gonna do like Hollywood Squares. I'm going to begin with, I'm gonna say hi to Dr. Thomas Ali. So you're here. Thank you for joining us. Take a minute and just, who are you? Where are you coming from?
Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. I am Dr. Jacqueline Thomas Ali from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm a naturopath. And my office is in Manioc on Main Street. And my focus is energy medicine, and I love what I do. I love what I do. As far as family members or friends with diabetes, I have one close friend, and we've known each other since middle school, who has diabetes and was kind of taking it for granted in terms of making adjustments, making changes, but when things really started getting out of hand, she reached out and said, look, I need help. So we worked out certain things together. And I said, you got it from here, and if you find you need to do something else, just do it. Don't look for me for approval. You just go ahead and handle it and do it, because this is your life. And I trust that you will be led to where you need to go to get what you need to get. So that's my story.
Thank you. Thank you. We're so glad you're here. And I'm going to go to Alicia Michelle, and I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going to pop up the rows here. Hello. And now I've got to unmute you again. Let me do it. Okay. Wait a minute. Where we're going to, there. Try it now. Say something. Oh, it doesn't want to unmute you.
Hi, does that work?
There it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, okay, well, I'm Alicia. I live in Gainesville, Florida right now, and I work at Still Point Therapy, which is an acupuncture, massage, yoga, martial arts clinic and studio. And I've always been in the healing arts since I was young. As soon as I learned about healing, even just from the Bible and being a little kid and learning about Jesus and healing and all that, it's always been like something very important, powerful, and my life's mission to share information and heal myself and my own deep core wounds and such. So let's see, I kind of forget the questions, but I'm really happy to be here. Diabetes, my dad has type 2. I do bioenergetic medicine. I'm an astrologer, and I'm really into healing and mechanics and also communicating with other people and connecting like this. I'm really, really happy to be here, and nice to meet you ladies, the other ladies, and the doctors. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Okay, so Anastasia, I'm going to unmute you, I hope. Give it a minute. Okay.
Let me do it.
No, it's done.
Okay,
That's
it's
why
good.
I'm a host. Thank you.
Well, I know, but it pops up a window and it asks me if I want to unmute or stay muted. So I have to push something in order to let it. Yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
I think that's a new thing with Zoom.
Well, they get so popular.
I know. So I'm Anastasia Townsend, and I've worked with NEEs. Well, I started into energy medicine over 25 years ago, and that was just I wasn't quite out of massage school when I met you and started that journey. So here we are still today, and doing work with the bioenergetics and essences, ketones, and also in terms of diabetes in our life, I know it's affected my family. My oldest daughter is dealing with that, and I know that I myself am become more insulin resistant, so I have to be really careful. And then I'm thinking my younger daughter, which is really odd to me, is also possibly dealing with some insulin resistance as well. So it seems to be coming on really fast, and for people much younger now. And so I'm very, very interested in this
Thank you.
particular topic. Yeah, thank
It
you.
affects a lot of people. Okay, and then we have Cheryl. Okay, now I'm going to mute you, Anastasia. You muted yourself. All right. Cheryl, I'm going to press unmute, and then you tell me what happens. Because from my end, it says you're unmuted.
I'm seeing I'm unmuted.
Okay.
If you can hear me.
Yes.
Hi. Hi. So I just have to tell you, I was born in Erie, Pennsylvania, many years ago. So I live in Redmond, Washington, and just met you yesterday and your group, and was just so drawn to what you have to say. And when I saw this, I was interested. My father-in-law has diabetes and is totally ignoring it, like does what he does, but is not consciously taking care of himself by choice. And he lives in California. And I don't know what else to say about that. It is what it is. And then on the flip side, I have a friend who had Mexico. She owns her own clinic, women's clinic. had a year's worth of injection and is now no longer a diabetic. She doesn't have, she's done with it. So I know there's different things out there, different modalities, different ways, but I was curious to hear what you all had to say today.
Great. Thanks for being here. Yeah, it's interesting how this shows up and when it shows up, how people respond to it. So I will share. I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and in 2015, as part of what I feel has been an ongoing spiritual development process and inner work, was presented after several years of major stress and a lot of significant losses for me, a lot of instability, and for me, they were significant difficulties that I was working through. And from about 2010 through 2015, just bam, 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 bam. So in 2015, I had healthcare at that time, and I thought, you know, you need to do a physical at least every 5 to 10 years. Come on, go get a physical. So I went to get a physical, and they did the blood work and the usual things. And then I got a call to come back into the doctor's office, and you know, I did. And she sat me down. She said, "Well, you have type 2 diabetes." And I looked at her, and I kind of settled in, and I said, what makes you think that? And she said, well, your numbers on your blood here. She showed me the test and she showed me the numbers. And I said, that's interesting. So she says, I'm going to give you a prescription for metformin and we're going to get you started. And my own energetic, the compaction that we're all experiencing now in 3D. I was like 215 pounds. The stress had just torqued me in so many ways. And I said, well, sure. Like, whatever. I'll go get the prescription. So then I went home. I got the prescription filled. And I sat down and when I got home and I held the bottle of metformin. I was like, oh no, no. And then I read the pamphlet of all fully sat down and read the entire pamphlet of the contraindications and the possible side effects and the yada, yada, yada. I have no one in my family has diabetes, so I was very highly suspicious about this anyway. So I just said, well, I'm just going to put this medication in the kitchen cupboard and I'm going to leave it there. And what I'm going to do otherwise is I'm going to immediately stop using white sugar. I'm going to immediately stop eating pork and most meat. I'm going to immediately begin eating way more fruits, way more vegetables. I'm going to immediately begin committing to walking 30 minutes at least 3 times a week because I'm a funny duck. And that's what I'm going to do. And then the most important thing I'm going to choose is that I don't accept this as part of my reality. So I'm going to do everything within my personal power to see if we can create a change. So, and then I didn't talk to the doctor again for several months. And I went back and I had lost some weight and I've been doing the stuff I've been doing. And she said, okay, now we're going to do some blood work and how's the medication? And I'm just not saying anything. And the blood work came back that I no longer was over that, whatever that line is, I was no longer over it. She said, oh, this is great. I said, no. I said, doctor, I need to let you know that I've been using alternative methods to deal with this and I haven't taken the medication at all. And the way I'm feeling right now, I think our relationship is over and I will be looking for another physician because
Wow.
I don't like the way you're running your practice. I don't like the way you approached me. I don't like the way you handed me a medication without offering me any other information or alternatives or ways to manage what you wanted to assure me was type 2 diabetes. So we're done. Thank you. Bye-bye.
That is so funny.
Well, that was what I needed to do because I do energy work. I've been doing this for a long time and I went in and explored, okay, what's this really about? And that's when I had the moment to sit down and recognize how much of the sweetness of life I had lost in the previous 5 years, and the stress and the trauma.
Now, the only way that you can have low yin energy, and these are categorized like female, male, hot, cold, in, out. These are all different ways to categorize yin and yang. So if you have a female and she has a certain amount of estrogen in her body, throughout her life, she has a certain amount of estrogen. And at a certain point, when you go through menopause, you have less estrogen. But it's not just estrogen, but that's the easiest way to explain it, I believe. So as you go through menopause, you start having less estrogen, which is less yin. If you're going to have less yin, if it's going down, then your yang goes up.
Yeah.
Yin is cold. Yang is heat. And that's why people exhibit heat signs when they become yin deficient, because the yang is just taking over. And it's because of the interdependence that works that way. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about, which is just really helps explain diabetes. There's also a way of diagnosing different diseases that's called the 5-element theory. And there are 5 elements or 5 phases. There's wood, which makes fire. There's fire, which makes earth. There's earth that makes metal, and metal makes water. And then it starts again. Water makes wood. Okay, so this is the 5-element theory. So this goes in a cycle. If you could imagine a cycle that starts with water, then wood, then fire, then earth, then metal, and back around again. And we say that one generates the next one. Okay. And if things are in balance, all of your elements will be in balance. And they'll be working together. If they're not, if one is more pronounced than the other, then you're going to have some issues. So with something like diabetes is basically centered in this area, which is the earth area.
We can't see what you're pointing to. Could you describe it like midsection of the abdomen or third chakra? Can you help us out with that? We can't see can't see what you're pointing to.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. So if you have a okay. So if you, yes, I'm pointing to your stomach and your spleen. Basically this area up here. Okay. And these organs relate to earth energy. Anything that deals with digestion, that deals with food, that is the earth. And it makes a lot of sense. You can have that understanding because our food comes from the earth, and then we digest it in this area. So this is the stomach and the spleen. And the stomach and the spleen are responsible for digestion. Okay. So another element, I don't want to go through all of them because it gets a little complicated. It really take a lot more time than we have just to explain it. But another element that I think is very important to have an understanding about is the wood element. And see, if you look at the cycle, the wood generates fire, the fire generates earth, okay? So right now, we're in the season of wood.
Mhm.
The wood is the trees coming out of the earth. The wood, the energy of the wood is really like a bursting forth or sticking straight up, like the trees stick up out the earth, right? And jutting forth. That's the energy of spring. It's all about blooming and things coming up and new ideas you might be getting, things being born or renewed or regenerated. That's what the wood energy is about. And it's interesting to me because our seasons have become so, like, there used to be a precise time you could tell by the weather that it was spring. You could tell by the weather that it was fall or winter or something like that. But now I think we had really warm weather in January, and we had a number of warm days in February and March. And now it's getting a little colder. But it makes you think, okay, so what is happening in terms of the seasonal influences in terms of this 5-element theory that we're dealing with? I've thought about it a lot in recent days because our with the COVID-19 has an effect on the lung, and the lung and the large intestine. Their particular season is the fall, and it just makes me think that perhaps we really got this virus sometime in the fall.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I'm
yeah.
talking about. I really think it came in the fall,
Mhm.
and it's staying here. So hopefully, with all this detoxification that's taking place right now, and that's right on line, right in line with what's happening in terms of the natural world. This is the time of detoxification. This is a time when the liver needs to be cleaned out, and the other is the gallbladder. So it's an excellent time to do that. And that's what the earth is doing. If anybody has gone for a walk recently, I mean, the air just smells so much better and just feels so much clearer at this point. So it's really a good time to try to get some fresh air. Now when you go outside, you can really get some fresh air. But that's the earth. The earth element is more like late summer. So I'm not sure of the correlation now because things are just so kind of turned around in terms of our season.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions so far about anything I've said so far?
I'm curious from the point of view of working with the spleen and the stomach and the issue of digestion and synthesis of what the food breaks down into. And also in terms of the elements, what in your experience, where would you approach an acupuncture session with somebody who has, you were either diagnosed them with diabetes or they're coming to you with a diagnosis of diabetes? Would you work directly on the spleen? Would you work with triple burner? What would be your approach to beginning to rebalance the system?
Okay, yeah, I was definitely going to get to that. Um,
Curious.
remember, I had mentioned they're called correspondences in terms of the 5 elements. So there's certain characteristics, there's certain things that go along with each element. I just want to say this first, and then I'll get to what you're talking about. So the season for Earth is late summer. Now this is from the Neijing, or the oldest medical text from China. It comes up a little bit. The mysterious forces of the earth create moisture in the heaven and fertile soil upon the earth. They create the flesh within the body and the stomach and spleen, pancreas. They create the yellow color and give the voice the ability to sing. They create the mouth and sense of taste, the sweet flavor, and the emotion of anxiety and worry. And I just wanted to mention that or talk about a little bit because these are what's called the correspondences for Earth.
Mm.
And these all relate to issues that you see in diabetes. Because diabetes is known as a disease of dampness. It's also known as a disease of sweetness. And a lot of times what goes along with certain types of diabetes is a lot of flesh. And of course it is the stomach and spleen organs that are affected more. But there are other organs that are also affected. They create the yellow color, give the voice the ability to sing, create the mouth and sense of taste, the sweet flavor, and the emotions of anxiety and worry. So you take your typical, I'm gonna say typical person who has diabetes, okay? Most of us, and I wanted to give an example just to, kind of clarify things for people, just to give you a picture really. And I think most of us could identify with this particular person. So, and if you think about the correspondences of Earth, this is that person. So you take a female, although it could be a male too, who has a job that is stressful, who's living in a home with children, possibly married, having marital difficulties, or if they're single, having difficulties with their partner, caring for children, not having enough time to exercise, not having enough time to fix proper food and deal with proper nutrition, in a state of worry due to, maybe they're not bringing in enough income, maybe because of their relationships, and because of all the other lifestyle things that, I just mentioned. But all of these kind of correlate with what happens with someone who's diabetic. And it doesn't have to. And that's why I mentioned there are 9 different syndromes in terms of Chinese medicine that we deal with, because some affect the liver. If a person is in a state of anger, so you have someone who's just kind of worried, but then you have people who maybe they're not worried, they're just in a state of anger all the time. So the anger causes what we call liver stagnation, or a liver that where the qi, the energy of the liver is not moving. And if the energy of the liver is not moving, then it's kind of stuck, what we call stagnation. And that causes really depression. And I'm not certain if people have questions about that or have an understanding about that. But in terms of energetic medicine, which acupuncture really is, when you are depressed, it's usually the heart and the liver that's affected. Okay. The liver is affected because it deals with emotions, and more specifically, the emotions of anger and frustration. Now, if that anger gets stuck, I mean, it's okay to be angry. You know, you can go outside and be driving, somebody cuts you off or whatever. You're going to be angry, you know. But the thing is, not to sit in that anger and stay in that anger. Because if you do that, that does not allow for the smooth flow of liver chi. And when you have the smooth flow of that chi in the liver, when it's moving the way it's supposed to, that's when you have peace of mind. And that's when you have a greater sense of well-being. So most people here in the United States are stressed and they're angry. And I think, I know that's one of the reasons why there's a tremendous amount of diabetes. In fact, from the CDC, there are 34 million people in the United States who have diabetes. That's like almost 11% of the population. It's ridiculous. Yeah, so now in terms of your question, there are, I didn't know which one I wanted to deal with first. I think I'll go to Western medicine first. Okay, so in terms of Western medicine, diabetes is seen as a chronic condition that affects the way the body can process sugar. Okay. And this means the body does not fully respond to insulin because it can't work properly. The blood glucose levels keep rising. That results in something that's called hyperglycemia. Diabetes is most commonly diagnosed in older adults, but increasingly more children have diabetes. In fact, I've had a couple of clients who were like teens who had diabetes. One who had diabetes 1, and one with type 2 diabetes. So we're seeing it more and more. Well, in terms of Eastern medicine, well, in terms of Western medicine too, it's basically seen as a disease of lifestyle. So if you can, you know, eat more vegetables, eat more grains, eat more things that are healthier for your body, and also exercise, and also have correct thought, and also do your meditation, get in touch with your spirit, all those types of things, it does have an effect on that. In terms of Eastern medicine, this is seen a little differently because with acupuncture, we have something called a differential diagnosis. So if I have two people, I have one person, 25 years old, maybe 115 pounds, in a pretty good state of health, just diagnosed with diabetes, however. And then we have someone else who's a gentleman who's 6'5", 275 pounds, and he's just been diagnosed with diabetes. We're going to treat them entirely different. But there are other factors that come into play. We're not just going to, prescribe metformin and that's it. Because one person has one pattern of disease, that's what we call it, and another has another pattern of disease. So you have to have, what's called basically a differential diagnosis. So the person is 25 years of age. If, she comes in and she says she was just diagnosed, maybe pre-diabetic, I would tell her, well, you have to deal with the worry, the anxiety, because initially when a person comes into the office, the first thing I ask them is how are you doing? How are things going? How's your relationship? How's your job? How are your children? Do you like what you do? Do you have a job? And from all of these questions, I'm able to ascertain what's going on, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So, and especially if someone is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. We also ask, what is their appetite like? How's your diet? So I think it's very good to deal with it that way, because as a person comes in, and I have clients who I've seen for years, on a regular basis. So if I notice something different when I start my questioning, then I'm able to, take note of that. So it can be preventative if you are, coming in for holistic treatments on a regular basis. So if she had that issue, I would just recommend to her maybe certain types of exercises. I recommend to people, so much to meditate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's important to meditate. And especially if people are stressed out, I recommend a meditation. Then I would recommend certain foods, specifically for the earth energy. You need root foods like pumpkin, squash, all the different, orange vegetables. And of course, the fresh leafy green vegetables. I recommend things like that. And I'd also tell them to increase their water intake. There's certain teas you can take.
Yeah.
So those are things that I would recommend. And with the gentleman who also has, diabetes, I would recommend something a little different. And I would also treat them with the acupuncture differently. So I wouldn't give her as many needles. I wouldn't, I might just deal with a couple of needles to help in terms of the diabetes. So I would basically do acupuncture points on the stomach and the spleen. There are a few in the back that are specifically for acupuncture. Acupuncture is very good in terms of dealing with neuropathy, which is something people with diabetes.
Like to go is into what happens energetically when we are experiencing the loss of the sweetness of life, and what kinds of generational trauma many of us end up dealing with over longer timelines. Because one of the things I'm aware of is in the communities of color in the United States, certainly, many more people, percentage-wise, if you want to look at the breakdown of racial dynamics, there are many more people of color and Latinos and Hispanics who are struggling with the issue of diabetes. And I think this is also true for our red brothers and sisters in the reservations, the Navajo, the other people who, what I would love us to do is really open our insight and understanding into how as we take care of ourselves, and how as we may go with someone who is going to be working with us in our self-care journey, to really take the time to, first of all, look at your own situation with stress, with worry, obviously, but also where have you specifically lost what we could think of some of the basic sweetness that's from being alive and being human. Connection with other people that is supportive and loving and kind and nurturing, with certainly anger if you're feeling that you're disempowered or you're not able to move forward in your life as you would see yourself moving forward, or as you would visualize that you're not able to find yourself in a position where you're actually, the balance of doing what you love is in balance with the other things that are happening in your daily life. So that's a trauma. When we have a gift or a talent or an ability or a desire to express who we are as individuals, from whatever spectrum of life, when that gets blocked from my paradigm that I'm working in, that is the beginning of losing the sweetness of your own life, which means that your digestion of ideas or emotions or information may actually come together to create an impedance in your physical digestion. Like you can't digest the fact that although you're qualified for a job, you won't get that job because of the color of your skin. Or you're qualified for that job, but you won't get that job because you're a woman. And the level of the sweetness of your own life that you're not able to manifest, that is long-standing trauma. It's emotional trauma, it's mental trauma, and it cycles. It depending on how you manage it, it may just go and you have another cycle, and then you have another cycle. And you may come from a family where these cycles interconnect, where you have a family history. And depending on how far back you know your family, their story, where they came from, how they got to the United States, what their stories are. There's a lot of other information about the intergenerational trauma and the ancestral trauma that your family line has experienced for repeated cycles, which means now that your own DNA is affected. Your own DNA has been dinged. Your capacity to reproduce healthy cells, which if you were born healthy as a baby, the beauty of the human system is that we can replicate ourselves. There's a pattern for this. And when we're in balance and aligned and healthy, our cells replicate perfectly. Again and again and again and again. But when we go into intergenerational trauma and ancestral trauma, the way that your cells are impacted, the DNA is impacted by that information as a form of energy, will disrupt your DNA's capacity to produce a good, clean copy of the cells that make up your spleen, the cells that make up your pancreas, the cells that make up your liver, the cells that make up your stomach, right? So I like to look at this from a really kind of an integrative point of view of what else do we look at in addition to all the beautiful information in Chinese medicine. What else can we find out as we're doing our diagnoses, as we're discovering where is the foundation, where's the seed of this situation? And I think that's a beautiful intersection with our spirituality, because it becomes such a loving journey of self-discovery and of really looking at what's happened in your family. Have there been traumas in your family that have never been resolved? For instance, we have people who came to America after the potato famines in Ireland. The family lineage has, and potatoes being one of those rich, starchy foods, think about the intergenerational trauma of having to escape a situation where there was massive famine and people were dying of starvation. And then you managed to get yourself out of that situation. Incredibly stressful to take nothing and put yourself on a boat and go somewhere new, or you have no idea how you're going to survive. But maybe they have at least food, right? So think about the kind of stress, and that's a running story in your family line, even if it never gets talked about. I also think this is true for a lot of other illnesses that crop up in our life, and they on the surface they look like lifestyle on the surface, but underneath there's much more information that's available to us. So I wanted to talk about losing the sweetness of life, connection, affection, touch, really experiencing the loving touch of a handshake, a pat on the hand, a pat on the head, a really loving hug, and then moving up and down that scale with how we relate with our children with touch, and where we go in our intimate lives with touch, and how in some traditional lines and stories, that way of flow, safely and openly and completely has been abruptly truncated and traumatized.
Mm.
So I know in communities of color, you can have it with women, but you can just have it when we look at the history in the United States of 400 years of, bringing people and enslaving them and then putting them into a system where they are continually reintroduced into a cycle of stress, anxiety, and brutalization and violence and poverty and hunger, all the while still trying to have a sense of self that one can be proud of, that one can feel is contributing to life. This is incredibly traumatic, loss of sweetness of life. When we look at communities of color where the men are in prison and the women are managing on their own, and the children are growing up in that environment. Now, you can have women of all colors, shapes, sizes, ethnicities, raising children alone. When we look at the dramatic rise in diabetes in this country, and we look at the dramatic rise in single-family households being managed by women who don't have a stable male energy in the house, that is a yin-yang imbalance. And it is ongoing, and it goes on and on and on, year after year, year after year. And the children are growing up in that energetic container.
Mhm.
And in that energetic container, is there money to buy fresh, healthy vegetables? Does mother even have the education to know about nutrition? Or because of her line of generational information, she only knows about Twinkies and Frosted Flakes and other foods loaded with sugar. She only knows to give her children soda pop, right? This goes on. And so I think the cultural piece of why we lose the sweetness of life is really important. And why when we want to go to get our health care, we want to have a team of people who we can actually sit down and frankly talk about some of the trauma that may have happened in our lives that has never been resolved. And of course, there's a role for talk therapy there, but there is a role for acupuncture. There's a role for what Dr. Ali does. She has a methodology that she uses. There's certainly a role for the work that I do. Because if we stay at the superficial level with, oh, your blood work says, and here's a bottle of pills. Now if we take the pills, and if we're a younger person who's dealing with type 2 diabetes, let's just stay there. Now we are also altering our genetics over time. And if we're someone who's then going to go on and have a child after we're in that situation, well, we know about the risks with being a woman with diabetes who has children. We know that there's a really high level of additional risk there, and those pregnancies have to, of course, naturally, because you've been on medication, you have to look at a medicalized birth. More trauma for the baby who comes into that environment. Trauma for the child who's born into slavery and then sold, never sees mom and dad again. Entire family disrupted. Trauma for the family whose teenager has been shot dead in gang violence, right? So there's an incredible opportunity, I feel, now that we're in this COVID environment, to reset. The reset is being forced upon us. It's not voluntarily for most people, but here's an opportunity to reset and to really take the time, because we've been given the gift of time, which we may not otherwise usually have if we're working a job or doing whatever, where we can actually take the time to get quiet. And if we've been given a diagnosis of diabetes, there's an assessment list of questions that are different than the questions a doctor would ask you about what's going on in your emotional life. Tell me your family story, your family history. How, there's so much more information that when we open it up and people have a chance to express this and feel safe to share it, we are actually releasing some of the chi that's gone stagnant because it's had no place to go. It's had no vehicle for expression. And that for me is a really important part of how do we look at self-care, being spiritual beings having a physical experience? Because the stories are incredible. And the stories are also part of what keep us confined in certain patterns. Because that's the story. That's what we've got. There's no way to break out of that story. We're not empowered to even come into a relationship to these stories that move us into different perspectives. So I just really feel so passionate about losing the sweetness of life. And I know that when I was using white sugar, that was an internal hug for me. That was a hug I couldn't get anywhere else in my life. It was a comfort for me. I felt a little bit of nurture in having a cup of tea with 2 teaspoons of sugar in it. Now, when I began to unpack what was going on with me with diabetes, I had to really look at that. I could have chosen not to, but I did look at it. And I did allow myself to be aware. And when I would open the refrigerator door and I would just look inside the refrigerator and stare at it. You ever had that experience? You open the fridge and you look in there and you just stare. And while you're staring, if you pay attention and are present in that moment, you may come into the awareness that what you really seeking and needing is not in the refrigerator. Where is it? Can you feel it? Can you make a list of the things that you're trying to feel in your life that bring you a sense of sweetness? Good friends, hanging out with people that are, easy to be with, that will share authentically with you about what's happening in your life. So I love it that we can sort of take this conversation and roll it out in this direction. So from that perspective about the sweetness of life, let's think about what would be some of the remedies that we can, like Anastasia, you're saying that you're now showing signs of insulin sensitivity. You are, and your daughter is, and your older daughter is. What's the family story there? Is there a lot of stress? Is there a lot of dynamics going on that everybody's just kind of powered through it just to get through it? Or what's happening there that you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I realized that my mom is also in that same state. So it makes me think there's something there even that I haven't seen yet that's going through the lineage, coming down. But so that I don't know. There was another incident, within my family, my unit, family unit, that was very traumatic, and it did affect us all a lot, and it went on for way too long. And so as you're speaking, and as I've thought about it, that seems to be the trauma that it relates to. But then if I take that resonance and look, try to look down, past just my family unit, it makes me really wonder, what is really there, what's really going on.
And as a body worker, if someone comes into your place of work and is going to have a wonderful massage with you, would it be a question that you would ask? Would you know whether or not they're dealing with a particular situation, like cancer, or like diabetes, or some other chronic condition. Yeah.
Well, not in body work as much as when I practice midwifery.
Okay.
We, because of the school I went through in particular, it was a very specific school of thought. And yes, we very much had more questions along the lines of what you're saying, when we would talk to women. In massage, not so much, because that's not really necessarily within the scope of practice.
Mhm.
But if I saw someone where I knew I was seeing signs on their body of insulin resistance, then I would have a conversation with them, just because I need to nudge them into some awareness that, hey, I think you might need to check this out.
Yeah, great. I think that's a beautiful intervention. And we do have the opportunity to come to that point of intervention with ourselves and with other people. That's really beautiful. Dr. Lee, you're going to have to go. Do you want to pop in here for a minute and share? I know you're a brilliant woman. You've got lots going on. Maybe you have something you want to add to the conversation. Thanks, Anastasia.
No, everything is flowing just as I knew that you guys would handle, would do. And the information, Eloise, it is spot on. It's spot on. It's right on point. And Anise, I'm just grateful that you guys are sharing this, and that hopefully you'll have an opportunity to do it again in the near future.
Yeah, I'd like to do it again, and I'd like to do it live with people in a room. In a situation where there were pamphlets and sheets of paper and cards and opportunities for people to take up the conversation in a living way and then move about freely to come to another resolution of the information that they're in right now. So thank you for that. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll hang in
Thank you, Dr.
for another 5 minutes, but when you see me leave, then I just want to kind of give you a heads up.
And we're still looking forward to having you presenting in May. We're going to figure out how to do it.
Okay, we'll work it out.
Okay. Thank you. Alicia, you're in the care space. What would you like to add to this conversation? Let me unmute you.
I think it's really important. Now I'm not muted. My daughter.
Hi, daughter.
Hey, I'm Aaliyah.
Hi.
Yeah, just give me more minutes. So I think one of the takeaways I have from today is just about the stress aspect and losing your sweetness in life. So I went through a really hard experience a few years ago, and I remember it lasted a long time. I couldn't taste my coffee. I couldn't taste. And I stopped dancing because I'm a yoga teacher, and I teach elders cardio, and I do strength training, and I'm really into a lot of different things that have to do with healing. My body is my main things, mind, body, spirit connection, and helping people have that connection when their organs are speaking to you and those types of things. So, but something you said earlier, it really even though I'm fit and I exercise and I take care of myself, and I've always had a really good diet since I was a kid, became a vegetarian very young, being around cows. But I was just thinking, God, could that affect me for all the stress that I was under? The work, I've been a single parent, you guys, for 13 years. I ran the YMCA. I ran the YMCA for 7 years over here before I started at Still Point as the wellness director. And I'm talking 50 hours a week for 7 years, So anyway, when you were saying that, Anais, I was like, Anyway, I thought that was interesting because it can happen to anyone, and it has to do with what's going on with the chi in the body. And so that was a really kind of an aha moment for me. But I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I think we're just sharing experience and what's our perspective on something. And we're all so unique and individual, and yet diabetes, you know what I'm thinking right now with COVID?
What's that?
I'm thinking we're going to see a spike.
Yeah.
in, I don't know, 5 years, people are not going to recover from this without a tremendous amount of stress. And can't you see that what is happening now becomes an intergenerational story?
Yeah.
Where certain things became unsafe, right? And we were already down the line of children being over sexualized. And so a genuine sharing of clean, clear, nurturing affection has been ruled out between adults and children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a teacher can no longer give an unhappy child in a classroom a hug without risking, you know, trauma for them, yeah, and more trauma for the kid. So I think we really need to look at this moment of reset that we're in and ask some really big questions and think about, because we're women, right? We make things happen. We do a lot. How can we come into the reset? So many people on the brink of losing the sweetness of life.
Can I?
Go ahead, Dr. Ellie.
All right. We all know what we have to do. And that's why I really said that I believe we have to believe that we're really spiritual beings. So even though I can't touch you energetically, I can feel you and send you all kinds of love and compassion and just gratitude for who you are and everything. And you will receive that. By the same token, if I have someone still working on something that, you know, I just can't stand, and, you know, the relationship is just, you know, a lot of anger and that type of thing. That's in there. They're feeling that or sensing that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to have to start relying more on our energy, you know, because that's what I think about in terms of my grandchildren. I'm like, oh my God, I can't see my grandchildren. I'm always trying to send them energy. And we started doing these Zoom meetings, and that's helpful. But I think we have to, more than anything, do the meditation, send energy to the universe, send it to our country, to our state, to our cities. Yeah, because that touch and everything, it is going to be missed. But
It is being missed right now. Yeah.
Oh, but I do believe that what you can't see is a lot more powerful than this three-dimensional stuff. So we just have to keep that in mind and just stay in a state of gratitude and love. But the other thing I wanted to mention, and I really forgot about this, there's actually an emotion. Well, all the meridians, all the organs are seen as, you know, people with certain jobs. So the job of the spleen, in Western medicine, the job of the spleen is to help to refine the food so that it can be transformed and transported into blood for the heart. Okay, so it has to really do a good job of doing that. And so in terms of Chinese medicine, it's portrayed as like a guard that's standing there, making sure, you know, separating the pure from the impure. And in terms of relationship, the way you see that is sometimes you see people and you're like, why is she with him? They don't know how to separate the pure from the impure. And in terms of diabetes, that would be something. Why are they eating like that? They don't know how to separate the pure from the impure. You know, it goes from relationships to food to all kinds of things. You know, they don't know how to really do what's best for themselves. And that's the job of the spleen. I mean, the stomach actually, mixes everything up and gets it all together, mushes everything. But the spleen actually separates everything and makes sure it's pure to go into your blood. So I just thought about that and I said, oh, that's right. The
Oh,
function of
thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And Anastasia, I mean, you're in a really interesting place because you have so much, I know you have so much information from so many modalities. And one of the things that I think also is part of this conversation about the sweetness of life is addiction.
Mhm.
It's hard to get into the conversation of the sweetness of life without looking at addiction at multiple levels. And I know how hard it was for me to give up white sugar. Oh boy. I mean, really, I think like day 5, I was like, oh, well, this is an addiction. Oh, by the way, coffee is an addiction. By the way, coffee and sugar are both plantation foods, which have a history of traumatizing people for producing the substance. Duh.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and I could have a conversation about that, Dr. Eloise, because I've gone into that with some great depth. There are foods that we eat regularly in the American diet. Rice, when you think about Carolina and what went on in the islands and the whole Geechee culture, and it got all the rice went everywhere. This is food that was embedded with the energy of oppression, of fear, of domination, of violence, and of financial inequity in the food.
Same thing with bananas. Bananas are slave food.
Bananas are a
Even
slave.
now, they're
Even
produced that way.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're talking to our folks about let's unpack the whole story. And maybe your ancestral lineage has trauma that you may not even be aware of, but you know what? Can you just eliminate bananas from your diet and see how this changes for you? Yeah, yeah.
Powerful.
Well, I think this is the beginning of something, and I hope that Eloise and I are in the same city, and we have an opportunity to work together in a wellness center, and we're doing things together in the community, and trying to really nurture collaboration amongst practitioners. So this was a little baby step for us, but I'm so thankful to you for coming and sharing. She has, we all have a tremendous breadth of information. We do. We do. But I do, in certain communities, people are not familiar enough with the benefits of acupuncture or how they could fit into a whole holistic plan.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. It's good for everything.
Really,
It's ancient medicine. They've been doing it for thousands of years. They know what they're doing.
for sure.
Really wonderful to meet both of you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So we're
So
recording.
much of it.
We've recorded it. I'm going to pop it up on my Patreon page. Eloise is going to get a copy of the video. She can do whatever she likes with it, send it out an email. But we really would love to, if you felt this had any value to you, just pass the link on to people and have them take a look, because it may get them thinking about their own situation in a way that's more open and health producing for them.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much.